war.
It's time to put the team together.
Guys, you're gonna love it. We got all the toys.
Let's suit up. That sounds exhausting. Hulk, smash.
Hi everyone, welcome once again to Geek Fest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me today is Steve Avona. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, Carlos.
Today we have a show that Steve probably has been waiting for all his life to talk about.
You got that right.
And I'm not exaggerating.
I'm not.
We are going to be discussing The Avengers, the actual film that recently came out. Big, gigantically hyped film. And let's have a little chat to see if it actually lived up to all of its hype.
Oh, I think it does.
Steve, tell me a little about the film, a little background, where does all this come from?
Well, Marvel has been leading up to the Avengers film since they released Iron Man in 2008, when they had a little tag scene at the end where Tony Stark walks in on Nick Fury, who tells him about the Avengers Initiative.
Now, was that done on purpose? In other words, did they plan on shooting that scene when they planned on shooting that movie, or was that a last-minute, hey guys, I got an idea type of situation?
Well, Marvel, as early as like 2005, when they announced that they were going to start doing their own films, rather than licensing them out to other studios, the Avengers was mentioned. I never thought it was a very realistic possibility, but prior to Iron Man being released, it had been bandied about. But that scene was the first confirmation on film that there were plans afoot, to bring all these characters together. But you have to remember, at the time, there had been no Cap film, no Thor film.
Right.
The Hulk had just also come out the same summer as Iron Man.
But they at least had the Hulk behind them.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, they did have the Hulk, and didn't the Hulk tease also a little?
Oh, yeah. There was Robert Downey showed up at the end of the Hulk. Now, the Hulk, I believe, came out about a month after Iron Man, and they had a great scene where Tony Stark encounters General Ross and talks about, he's like, I hear you have a problem. And so that was the first time that there was a crossover. You actually had a character from another film appearing, crossing over into another character's film. I mean, that's something that was done in the comics all the time, but you had never seen that in a movie.
Didn't we also get, with the Hulk, a scene where you see either a piece or a section of the Captain America shield?
They talk about the super soldier serum in the Hulk. You see the shield in Iron Man 2.
Oh, that's right.
And also, once they got the ball rolling with the other films, they had a character, Agent Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, who was sort of the connecting tissue throughout all the films. He showed up in every one of the films.
Which we need to talk about later for obvious reasons.
Right. So once, it was established that Iron Man was a huge hit.
Yes.
Marvel knew that this was possible, but it was still a risky proposition because they were committing to doing the Avengers when Captain America and Thor hadn't even come out yet, and there was no guarantee that they were going to be hits. The Hulk was not as successful as they would have liked it to be. They didn't give it a sequel, but then there was the sense that they were going to use the Hulk in the Avengers. But they followed a plan. They released Iron Man 2, and then they released Cap and Thor last summer. And again, there's a high risk factor because by the time Avengers was shooting, Cap and Thor had just been released. So there was really no sense of, well, if these movies bomb, we still have to do the Avengers.
Right. It all could have fallen apart easily.
Right. So they were, I guess, very lucky and very smart in terms of who they chose to cast.
Now, who are these smart people? Is this Stan Lee? Is it Disney?
No.
Is it some Marvel guy? Who is that? Is it Jon Favreau? Who is it? Who exactly are we talking about?
Well, the big guy at Marvel Studios is Kevin Feige. He's the producer. He's the head cheese, so to speak, at Marvel, and he's the one who's sort of been orchestrating this whole thing. Stan Lee is a figurehead. they put his name on every movie and they send him a check. He does nothing. And same with Jon Favreau. I mean, even though he's an executive producer on Avengers, he had nothing to do with it. So Kevin Feige is the guy who's really been orchestrating this whole thing and making it happen. He originally had worked at Sony, and he had done the Spider-Man films.
Oh, okay.
So he knew Marvel, and he knew, the characters. And I think he's been doing a great job. I mean, now it's now that Avengers is an enormous hit, I don't know, I'm getting ahead of myself, but he's already going into like phase 2 because he's planning all the sequels, Iron Man 3, Captain Thor 2, and a possible Hulk movie, and everything leading up to Avengers 2. So
Wow.
he's really very forward thinking, and, he's really the man for the job.
Now, let me get way ahead of ourselves here. The previous films we've seen, when they do have these little tags at the end that hint to you of what's coming next, and not necessarily what's coming next in that particular franchise, in that particular line. In other words, you get a
Right.
tease of Thor at the end of an Iron Man film, meaning this isn't Iron Man 3. It's Thor 1 that we're leading to next.
Right.
Is it safe to say that the tease that we will be talking about later in this film leads to not necessarily Avengers 2?
No, I would say in this case it does lead right into Avengers 2.
Wow. That's long term.
Yeah, and again, it shows the commitment. Yes, Avengers is enormously successful, but you have a few X factors here. You definitely have certain actors locked in, but you don't have Robert Downey. And there's been a lot of talk about how long they're going to have Robert Downey. I think his contract expires with Iron Man 3.
Wow.
And he's 48 years old. So I don't know how much longer he's going to want to be doing this. I'm sure they want him for Avengers 2 and, maybe some more Iron Man films. But I just heard Kevin Feige say that, if Downey doesn't want to do it anymore, they'll just kind of James Bond it.
Right.
Not retcon or not reboot it, but just put another actor in
Well,
there.
they already did it with his other co-star.
Oh, with Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo.
Not only that, but the guy who plays War Machine.
Oh, Don Cheadle.
Yeah,
Yes.
he replaced Terrence, what's his face?
Terrence Howard.
Yeah.
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 That's
Now,
true.
granted, it's not, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to be a physically exhausting, grueling role. When he's Tony Stark, he's Tony Stark, and it's just a guy, cracking jokes. I don't know how difficult of a role it is. I mean, 9 out of 10 times, it's all about money, whether or not somebody continues or not. I don't think Downey is really worried about being typecast.
Right.
Because that's the kind of roles he likes to do. He's Sherlock Holmes. He's this guy. He likes to be the action star, leading man.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, he's going to have played Iron Man 4 times in 5 years. So, it's either, he may get tired of the role, but he seems to love the role.
Right.
And also, 9 times out of 10, once he puts the mask on, there's a stuntman in the suit. So I don't think it's physically grueling.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's either CGI or somebody else, carrying all that weight around. And on an Avenger film, he's not, he's 1/5 or 1/6 of the film in terms of he doesn't have to carry the entire film on his shoulders either.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Again, to me, anything having to do with replacing a lead character like that for future films, it's all about money. I'm sure every film he appears, he wants double on the next one.
Right. But just to go back to what you said originally about the tag, I'm assuming that the people who are listening to us now have seen the Avengers, so I'm just going to...
No, yeah, I wouldn't worry about spoilers.
Okay.
This is a spoiler-ridden show that you're going to get.
Okay. The character that appears at the end of the film, not the one that's speaking. The one that's speaking, I'm not sure exactly who he's supposed to be.
The guy who turns around, I guess.
The guy who turns around is Thanos.
The purple
he
face.
He is one of the big,
stonish,
huge Marvel villains who has fought the Avengers over the years. And I, quite frankly, as a comic book geek, I was overjoyed to see them even attempting him. His storylines have been mostly in outer space and big, huge, sweeping storylines. So my guess is Avengers 2 is going to be bigger and bolder. I mean, Avengers was Earthbound.
Yeah.
But I'm getting the sense that this might take place, a lot of it in outer space.
Now, do we know anything about, and I know it might be too early to even say the actor. My son was asking me, Kyle was like, do you know which actor played him? I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure he was a CGI character when we saw that face turnaround. But he was like, yeah, but we heard a voice. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about the voice. Is there an actor that's attached to his voice right now? Or do they want to keep it, ambiguous so they can then cast some big name?
Well, I would assume they would go for a big name. I don't think he spoke. So I don't think...
Oh, he just kind of turned around. Okay.
Yeah, I think that they're safe. Like I said, that other guy did all the talking, and all he did was turn around. So,
well, I hope James Earl Jones is around when they do it, because
yeah, I mean, exactly. That's the kind of voice you're looking at for a character like him.
Okay, we jumped all the way to the end. Now let's go back to the beginning again. Let's talk a little about the actual film in terms of Josh Whedon's involvement, the actual characters involved in this particular film that we've seen before, a couple of new ones here or there, a lot of returning characters. Give us some of that.
Well, I think it's important to note that the characters, they're mostly the original Avengers characters from the comic. They were the founding members, with the exception of Ant-Man and the Wasp, who were not in the film and who have not appeared in a Marvel film as of yet. Mm-hmm. You had Iron Man, Cap. Technically, Cap is not a founding member. Cap was found in the ice by the Avengers in the comic, not by S.H.I.E.L.D.
But they keep referring to him as the original or the first Avenger.
Right. I mean, that's what that was kind of the subtitle of the movie, but, there weren't no Avengers when he was fighting in World War II. But technically, we're just talking about the comic. In the comic, he was found in the ice by the Avengers, not by S.H.I.E.L.D., and he became a member right after that. So, the other founding members were Iron Man and Thor and the Hulk, and they all fought Loki in the first issue of the comic. Obviously, they didn't do it in the same way they did in the movie. And the connection that the team has with S.H.I.E.L.D. in the movie is not present in the comic, not in the original comic, but I don't know how well-versed you are. Maybe Kyle has explained certain things to you, but there's the regular Marvel Universe, and then they have what they call the Ultimate Marvel Universe, which was a reboot of the Marvel characters done in the 90s for younger audiences.
Oh, my brain. I think I'm getting a nosebleed.
Well, and they sort of combine elements of both for the movie, because in the Ultimate Universe, you have the Nick Fury character who's an African American who looks just like Sam Jackson, and then they cast Sam Jackson. In the regular Marvel Universe, he was a Caucasian man, fought in World War II with the Howling Commandos, who you saw in the Captain America film, but not with Nick Fury. So they, like I said, they combine elements of both universes to make up the storyline in the movie. Having Hawkeye as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was not an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comic, not the comic I read as a kid. I'm not as well versed in the Ultimate Universe because I didn't read it. It wasn't for my generation. Some people, I'm not saying that other people of my generation didn't read it. I just had no interest in it.
I guess for film purposes, they got to simplify this a little bit.
Yeah, and they have to streamline certain things, make it more sort of believable, the character is somewhat more believable. And I think that made more sense to have Hawkeye as a spy and as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. rather than just a guy who was really good with a bow and arrow.
Right, out on his own.
But that just becomes his specialty. But yeah, so I mean, and the Black Widow, she actually worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comic. So, and she was a Russian spy originally, and there was a romantic history between her and Hawkeye in the comic.
Okay, that makes sense now.
They allude to certain things in the movie, but they never get specific in terms of their relationship. But you get the sense that there's a lot of affection between them, and she, references that she owes him some sort of a debt, or that he kind of brought her to the good side, and, she's very protective of him and him of her. So I think that the bringing together of the team, the way that it was done in the movie, made perfect sense. And the whole idea of it being Nick Fury's idea to bring them together to fight something that they couldn't handle.
Yeah.
Because why else would they ever get together? Why else would they ever need to get together?
Right. It's like Iron Man, he's on his own and he would rather actually stay on his own.
Right. What impressed me, one of the many things that impressed me, was the fact that Whedon, he nailed the relationships and really did them credit. The relationships between the characters and how they interacted in the comic with how they interacted in the movie. And the most notable would be Captain America and Iron Man, the tension between the two of them and the whole way they view the world and how they operate, and the dialogue between them is just perfect. And the way Evans and Downey kind of rub off on each other and piss each other off was straight out of the comic.
I like the fact that they stay true to their characters as far as the film goes. In other words, Captain America doesn't become a pushover. You know, he's
Right.
a leader type. He's behind the times, but he's the leader type. And
Right.
Iron Man, even though Tony Stark, even though he's a cocky bastard, he knows when to take orders, which he rarely
Right.
does.
Right.
And it works with them. But to
Yeah.
get to that point, it's also good to see all of that friction. I mean, hell, you throw Thor in the mix and these guys just want to rip each other's heads off.
Yeah. And what I loved is the fact that, Whedon knew that everybody was going to want to see, Iron Man and Thor fighting, or Thor and the Hulk fighting. But the way he did it and the way he showed us these scenes that everybody's wanted to see their whole lives, it was very organic to the story.
Right.
It wasn't just
It wasn't forced,
okay,
yeah.
they're going to have a fight and they're going to have a fight and, they're just going to get angry. And I mean, it was all within the framework of the story, and it was perfect. So I couldn't have been happier with, because as a little kid, you dream of seeing these characters, even though they're all heroes, you want to see them fight each other. You want to see who's the strongest, or, who could take who in a fight. And so we got that in the movie.
Now, let me ask you something. With Thor, are we supposed to get, because I got the vibe that, Thor is kind of like a paternal figure when it comes to Loki. It's kind of like, he's mine. We know he's a bad guy. You also get the feeling that he's trying to turn him back. He's never
Right.
giving up on him. Even all the way to the end, he doesn't give up on him after he hurts him. And there was a slight twinkle of him wanting to do something good, but then he goes bad again, that sort of thing.
Well, Thor, I guess, feels somewhat responsible for Loki being crazy, or just the fact that he's turned evil. And, there's that sort of classic stepbrother mentality there.
Even though in reality, Thor really has nothing to do with it. That was his father's, creation, I guess.
But it's Loki's jealousy of Thor that fuels his rage. And he's so annoyed that Thor is the favorite son, and Thor is heir to the throne, and Thor gets all the adulation, and he's gonna, he wants his kingdom. He wants to rule, and he's decided, he's gonna rule Earth, because not only does he see it as a weak population that he can easily take over, but Thor has declared himself Earth's protector. So what a better way to get back at Thor than to take over the planet, So I love the scenes between Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston. I mean, they really crack open that whole sibling rivalry. It's fantastic. And just to talk about Hiddleston for a second, I think not only is he perfect as Loki, I mean, as a villain, yes, it was wonderful that they used Loki since he was the first villain the Avengers ever fought. But he just had that menace, that disgust, that superior attitude. And I loved how Stark called him a diva. That was just a perfect way to describe him. And also to see that ultimately he would be his own undoing. I just thought it was great. And I love him, and I love the fact that he's probably going to be in all the Thor movies. I mean, he's a constant throughout the comic of Thor. You just never ever get rid of him. Thor has other villains as well, but I think, Loki's probably always going to be pulling the strings. It's just this eternal struggle that's never going to end.
Now, Thor is also, I found him that he's the guy that, I don't want to say fits the least, but he is the most outsider of them all, because in terms of acting and in terms of storytelling, he's this Shakespearean type of character almost that we did get a full load of on the Thor film. The Thor film was almost like two films. It was Thor World and Earth. And there was you could feel the shifting of the gears between those two worlds.
Right.
We got that whole fish out of water thing in the Thor film, which was cute. It was funny and it made sense. Here, and again, it goes back to that whole thing I said before about not giving up on the character. He didn't turn Thor into a contemporary guy that just goes along with everything modern, he's still struggling with the modernness, I guess, or the earthiness of Earth. He's still that same character that is saying these grandiose things and is acting big and everything. And he kind of doesn't fit. He's not part of this world.
Right. And that plays really well. And that's probably always going to be a theme in the Thor films. You know, he's never going to be completely at home on Earth, but he has like an affection. I mean, obviously he's in love with Jane Foster.
Right. And they do give her a little, I don't want to call it a cameo, but the fact that, oh, don't worry, she's away. She's, you know, she's safe to kind of, I guess, keep everybody at bay. Now, like I said before, the Thor character, I didn't see too much growth in it because he's playing basically the same character as before. Iron Man, same thing. He's still the same guy, the same level. There is no real character development, if you will, in terms of something new has happened that has changed him. Other than the fact that he's working with a team, that could be considered growth.
I agree.
The biggest growth that I think I saw as far as specific characters go is Cap. That whole thing about him adjusting, he's not completely adjusted. It's a different type of adjustment that Thor has. Thor will never adjust to Earth. Cap always seems to be trying to adjust, but the fact that even though in the first film, you know, he is somewhat of a leader, you know, he wants to be the leader, he's acting against people's orders to be the leader, here he takes that role and he owns it.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's, again, straight out of the comic. Even though he is that fish out of water, man out of time, it's almost second nature to him, and once the shit hits the fan, that's where he kind of comes into his own. And, you know, at the conclusion of the movie, he's taking charge and he knows exactly what to do. And they all fall in line. And there's this respect that they all have for him. Even Stark, you know, kind of falls behind him and says, okay, you know, this is the guy we have to listen to. Evans really impressed me because this is not a role that's very easy to deal with. Cap is the kind of character, he's kind of vanilla. He's a Boy Scout. You know, he believes in patriotism and sort of hokey old values.
Right. It's a little cheesy, but he also cannot go and be Johnny Storm either.
No.
That is not this character.
Evans is so used to playing those kind of smart alecky characters. He doesn't do that at all with Cap. And again, he embodies the character in such a way that you forget that he ever played Johnny Storm. But
the trick is that, like you said, he has to be this brave, patriotic character without looking like a joke. Like, you can't be stereotypically patriotic. He has to be honest. You know, it's so easy, I guess, or it's so dangerous for him to give lines and say, hi, I'm going here, I'm going, you know.
Right.
He has to tone it down and he has to make you believe it, and he does.
Right. I really enjoy his performance. And I think it's important to note that from what I've heard, there was a lot of character development that got cut out of the movie. Joss Whedon's first cut that he delivered was 3 hours long, and most of the stuff that did get cut out was character development. And I think that Whedon said that he's going to throw that all back in the Blu-ray.
Oh, of course.
You know, probably as like special features.
What was the final running time?
2 hours and 20 minutes.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of cutout stuff.
Oh yeah, and I think a lot of it is probably going to have to do with Cap acclimating to the new world, but other characters too. I mean, you got to remember, you know, you don't see Thor until like about 40 to 45 minutes into the film.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That took a while. Now, let me ask you a question. The biggest surprise for me, and obviously it's because we haven't seen him yet, at least in a while, and at least with this new character, is the whole Bruce Banner Hulk thing.
Right.
I loved the work that Ruffalo did. I love the fact that now again, you tell me if they changed the rules or not, but I love the fact that the secret or the twist is the fact that not only, yes, the Hulk can still get pissed off like normal and lose his mind like normal, but I also love the fact that apparently now he can do it on command and staying somewhat almost like 90% in control.
Yeah, that's been done in the comic, and I also think that they were alluding to that at the end of the Hulk movie with Edward Norton.
With his exercises, his breathing exercises?
Yes, that was something he was working on to, you know, be able to control the transformation. And I think you talk about character development. I think that they really pushed the Hulk forward in this film, you know, and not like in the first two films. You know, Banner was mopey and, you know, and suicidal, and he hated the fact that this curse was brought onto him. And even though he's kind of like that a little bit in the beginning, I love the scenes between Downey and Ruffalo, and where Downey or Stark is pushing him to accept this. This isn't a curse. This is a gift. Use this to be a hero. He was kind of explaining to him how he operates. He's like, I could be dead and, I have this shrapnel near my heart and blah, blah, blah. And instead, what do I do with it? I use it. It's a privilege. I use it to be a hero. Well, he was basically saying that to Banner.
I don't know about you, but I also got the feeling that, and again, maybe this is Ruffalo's performance, but I don't think he changes so much in the film in terms of, I think he kind of has this already under the surface. In other words, I don't think Downey has to completely convince him. I think he's playing Downey quite a bit. He's letting him think of him as somebody who's completely out of control, him himself knowing.
It's hard to say because one of the transformations, he transforms twice in the movie.
Yeah.
And the first time he transforms, he's obviously stressed, upset, enraged, and that causes the change. And the second transformation in the film, he completely just goes into it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's basically taking orders as the Hulk.
Yeah, and he's operating, okay, I'm here, I'm part of the team. He's still partially a brute, but you can tell that Banner is pulling the strings.
Yeah.
He's not like a genius like he is when he's Banner. And I think that what's also interesting is when Kevin Feige was interviewed, they did so much press before the movie, and people were saying, well, Ruffalo's the breakout character and blah, blah, blah. Maybe we should do another Hulk movie. And he's like, we did 2 of them. They really didn't do so well. Maybe this is where he belongs. But the Hulk, everyone is saying that the Hulk is the breakout character, and the powers above Kevin Feige's head are saying, you need to do a Hulk movie. And the buzz that I'm hearing now is that 2015, not only will that be Avengers 2, but that would be another Hulk movie.
Wow.
Because he's just off the charts in terms of popularity, and Ruffalo has a 6-picture deal. If they don't do Hulk movies, they're never going to fulfill that. So why don't they get their money's worth out of it?
But originally a 6-picture deal, meaning all Avenger films, in other words, the 6 pictures were not supposed to be Hulk alones?
Well, it just gives them the latitude to do whatever they want. In terms of like Evans and Hemsworth, their films are, Cap in Avengers, Thor in Avengers. Downey is the one that doesn't have the structured deal that the other ones have. But Ruffalo, and I even think Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner have the same deals. If they want to play these characters. Marvel originally wanted Chris Evans to sign a 9-picture deal.
Jesus.
And he said no. So they went to 6.
Now, the other thing I liked about Ruffalo was also the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he's the Hulk, I saw Ruffalo's face in there. It looks like him. It actually looks partially like him.
Well, they did try that with both Eric Bana and Edward Norton. And I think it worked a little bit better. The facial recognition worked better with Eric Bana than it did with Edward Norton. But they definitely did try to incorporate the actor's facial features. And I think, now, you're the CGI guy, you're the special effects guy. You tell me, I think this is the best the Hulk has ever looked on screen in terms of believability.
Oh, definitely, definitely. We knew for a fact that this time around, he was going to be playing both characters. Obviously, the human character, and they were going to do the capture motion stuff, the Avatar type of effects for the Hulk that hadn't been done last time. Last 2 films, they were completely CGI characters, not based on the actor, based on either, athletes or some other person's stand-ins. This time they actually did use his face, to turn it into the Hulk. And that's one of the first things I noticed. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This looks pretty close. I mean, yes, you are dealing with CGI, and CGI is CGI, but it brings it up a notch in terms of the quality of how close they're trying to get it to look.
Right. I agree. I was really impressed.
Now, let's talk a little bit about all the little bits and pieces that are memorable in terms of, I love the Hulk, completely going berserk with Loki throwing him like a rag doll.
That was amazing.
And then at the end, for the hell of it, he just punches Thor anyway.
That was great.
I was dying. I was laughing my head off.
Right.
I love the remarks when Stark first sees Thor. I think he calls them Point Break.
Point Break, yep.
And it's like nobody got that in the theater. And I'm like, don't you guys get it? Point Break.
Yeah.
It's a Swayze with the long hair. Come on.
Yep, I know. Well, that's the thing. I mean, Whedon himself is a pop culture junkie. So, he's making these jokes, not just for the comic book geeks, but also, we're not just comic book. Well, you're not one at all, but,
No.
we're all pop culture junkies. So, but I think even a lot of the average, viewers would get a lot of his humor. But, some of it is, like the Shakespeare in the Park, and does mother know that you're wearing her drapes and things like that. I mean, it was hilarious.
I want to see it again, and obviously I'm probably not going to see it again until it's on DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But I want to see it again because I want to catch all of the other little things that I missed. Because if you're laughing 1 minute, you might miss the next joke that comes in, and it's so
absolutely.
quick. It's like a hit and run. You got to look out because it's coming.
Right. I knew that from all his other stuff, from Firefly and Buffy and Angel, that he is just this master at crackling, snappy, clever dialogue.
And I was looking for that because I remember when we did the Whedon show 1 or 2 weeks prior, I remember all that stuff we talked about, and then I watched some clips because, when I put together the open and the closing, I was looking for clips from all these shows, and it's this rapid-fire, quick hits, jokes, and it's like, there they were. They were all there in this film.
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention about, which we touched on in the Whedon special, why they chose him as the director. One of the reasons, not only is he a comic book geek and, he's written tons and tons of comics, and he's taken a pass at the X-Men script. He knows that world, but he loves dealing with ensembles. And he with, again, Buffy, Angel, Firefly, anything he's ever done has usually had a large ensemble cast. And with the Avengers, he was the natural choice.
Yes.
Because what he did was he was able to service every single character. Everybody had their moment in the sun, but it never dragged the film down.
Not only that, but it also didn't feel like your typical, okay, it's my turn to save the world. Okay, I'm done.
Right.
Now it's your turn to save. No, everybody got their, I walk out of this movie thinking, oh, I didn't have enough of this or enough. No, everybody got exactly what they supposed to, or at least what I felt they should have gotten. Cap and Iron Man got a little more because they're a little more central. Everybody else, they got their equal slice of the pie.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as I said earlier in our conversation, it all felt organic to the story.
Right.
It wasn't like a forced Cap moment or a forced Tony moment.
No.
And one of the things that I think, we were sort of alluding to before is in the film, because he was the connecting tissue between all the films, a lot of times they had their moment with Coulson. Cap has his moment with Coulson. Stark has his moment with Coulson. Thor has his moment with Coulson. They all have relationships with him.
Well, speaking of this particular character, you know, what I would consider to be the second or almost third tier characters, in a way, you're talking with Nick Fury, his assistant, which this is the first time we see her in a full-blown film, and Coulson even. But Nick Fury, tell me a little bit about, in the comics, for example, is there this struggle between the Avengers not trusting S.H.I.E.L.D. too much on its own?
Well, it has kind of happened. Again, I can't speak to the Ultimate Universe too much because honestly I've really never read it, so I only know what I'm told. But in the classic Marvel Universe, S.H.I.E.L.D. started out as this kind of James Bondy man from U.N.C.L.'s spy agency from the 60s, but Fury was a World War II veteran who Cap worked with during the war, so there was a trust between the two of them. And even though Cap was never officially an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was always working with them. But as the years wore on, other elements crept into S.H.I.E.L.D. and kind of like Fury was thrown out of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a while, and, he was on the run from S.H.I.E.L.D. There were so many different storylines. But yeah, there is an element of distrust between the superhero characters and S.H.I.E.L.D.
Well, here we meet this committee, which Power Booths, out of all people in the world, is one of these committee members that apparently is giving Nick Fury his orders, and obviously they're even disagreeing with each other.
Right, and another one of the council people was Jenny Agutter, British actress, who was in An American Werewolf in London.
Oh!
She was the female lead in that. Just a little trivia. But yeah, again, I don't feel as equipped to talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. or, as it pertains to the film in terms of, because I don't know a lot about the Ultimate line, that there's a lot going on there that I'm not privy to.
But in the film, in the structure of this film, it's kind of like in the first half of the film, S.H.I.E.L.D. is very involved into getting things ready.
Yeah.
And even his assistant, I forget her name.
Kobe Smulders?
Yes. In the beginning, she has a pretty meaty role. She's like all action and kind of taking care of business. And then halfway through the film, they kind of, because the ship is hurt, the carrier is damaged, they kind of take a step back and let the Avengers themselves go forward, and lead the team.
Right. You don't see a lot of Nick Fury, you don't see a lot of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, because once the attack on the helicarrier happens, which is when the film really just goes full throttle, and that scene happens in all the various fights and the rush to repair the ship.
Right.
That becomes like sort of the exit for S.H.I.E.L.D. And then that's where the Avengers just completely take over the film.
Right. And like you said before, I never suspected that the film would start with already Hawkeye being turned, being
right.
Obviously he's not a bad guy, but Loki turns him, and it's like, oh my God, half this film they're already fighting a good guy. And the Black Widow, doing the back and forth, doing the secret covert mission, she's tricking them into stuff. And then she's kind of tricking Ruffalo when he's in India. And that's funny. That scene in India is the scene we saw at New York Comic Con last year. That's the exact scene. And then when she's in front of Loki and she's kind of opening up to him, and you're like, oh my God, she's doing the stupidest thing ever that you always do. You don't talk to him. And then you realize she's doing it on purpose. And they're like,
I know, that was great.
That was great.
Yep. That was amazing.
So even these minor characters, they all get their little time. And this, I think, would bring us now to the Coulson character. Now, I could be 100% wrong, but I could have swore when I watched him at New York Comic Con, him saying that not only has he's been on most of these other films, but that he would be on future films.
Well, that would be tough.
And in this particular film, what happens to him close to the end, I'm like, well, this has to be one of the credit roll extra scenes where all of a sudden they're going to give him a new heart or some kind of bionic something. I'm like, what the hell just happened? And then I started thinking, oh, wait a minute. Steve was telling me a couple weeks ago that Whedon doesn't have a problem getting rid of people. I'm like,
he doesn't.
And I'm like, oh crap! Is this the end of him?
And it just made perfect sense because he was a character who people over the course of the films, they developed a liking for him. He was very easy to like, and you couldn't kill anybody else.
Oof.
He could kill as many Firefly characters as he wanted because they're his. But Avengers, no. Forget it. So to bring in that sort of emotional crescendo that has to happen in a Whedon film where you lose something precious.
Even though Fury expanded on it in terms of, remember, he's like, these cards were in his pockets.
Right.
And then he was like, wait, sir, weren't those cards in his locker?
Right.
Like, well, yeah, whatever.
Right. But yeah, just the fact that he dies, it really sets them off. You talk about them not being a cohesive team, but when he dies, that pushes them over the edge. I mean, yeah, they want to save the world, obviously, but that sort of becomes their common purpose, that they want to all avenge him.
Right.
Because they all, especially Stark, had the, relationships with him, and, he's partially responsible for bringing them all together. So, I think it was a natural that he would be the one to be sacrificed.
Now, looking into the future, do you think we might get him back in some shape or form?
Well, the only way, and I think
after all, this is comic books.
Yeah, I know, and I think it would be cheap and cheesy if they did. But S.H.I.E.L.D., they have a thing. There was a throwaway line in the movie about life model decoys, which are basically, replicants of humans that Fury always used them as decoys, and people would think that he was killed, and it was really a robot.
Okay.
They're supposedly, completely, you can't tell the difference. Blah blah blah. They could do that, but I think that would just make it so cheap and so tawdry. I honestly, I can't see it happening. I think he's done.
Wow. Well, let me ask you something. Did you notice any other cameos or little surprises that most people might have missed? The only thing I noticed, which is not really that important, but they produced apparently, I think last year, after Captain America was made, some made for internet or made for DVD shorts involving Agent Coulson and another
Yeah.
agent who shows up in the film as one of the computer operators. He's the bald guy with glasses.
Yeah, he was in Thor.
He shows up in there, and that was kind of cool to see. Oh, there's a little minor character who's back.
Mhm.
But did you notice any, like every time I see somebody operating a computer or typing on something, I'm like, is that somebody important? Is that a Whedon guy? Is that somebody that I should be looking out to, for the future?
Well, that's the thing. I was looking for Whedon guys, and I was looking for other Avengers that might be showing up, and hinted at, because they did do that in other films. And the answer is no. I didn't see anybody from the Whedon cast. I had heard a rumor that Nathan Fillion was going to have a cameo, but he was nowhere to be found. And
That would have been cool.
Yeah, but
Unless they're saving, could you think they could save him for a future actual superhero?
I don't see why not. The beauty of the Avengers, here's the thing. I'm sure they're going to want to still use the big guns for the sequel, and they're going to have to use the big guns.
But you got to make room. But you also have to make room.
Yeah. But you have a wealth of other characters that Marvel has that they can use, sort of the B list.
Yes.
But they're not characters who will ever get their own films. But they were major characters in the Avengers. And you can start populating the movies with them as, just say for argument's sake, Downey is done. Maybe he does the second film and then he's done. Then you could just not have Iron Man in the Avengers, because in the comic they would go for years without, like, Iron Man wouldn't be a member or Thor wouldn't be a member. Usually Cap was the one who sort of stayed, but a lot of these big guns would leave and they would bring in minor characters or B characters like Hawkeye to come in and fill the void. So Marvel, I mean, they can just go nuts with what's available to them in terms of supporting characters.
Right, and that will give a lot of Whedon ex-actors plenty of space to and play in a sandbox.
Yeah, I think that the smart money is that Marvel will use Whedon again as a director. I really don't think there's anybody else for this franchise. I know Marvel, they tend to jump directors. They're not using the same directors for Iron Man 3 and the Cap and Thor sequels. They're going with other guys. But I think this movie, I've been looking online today that the movie has been breaking all sorts of records. It's made $200 million domestic already.
And hadn't it already made almost 300 international before it hit here?
I think international it had made like 180 million.
Wow.
So, to not have Whedon in the chair again would just be, I think, suicide.
By the time we air this episode, it'll probably double these numbers.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that's a safe bet.
So I'm getting the feeling that you kind of like this film. Is that what I'm getting here?
You said it earlier in terms of, was this the film I was waiting my whole life for? And the answer is yes, because as much as I love superheroes, as much as I love like the Fantastic Four and characters like that, I was never a fan of the X-Men. Everybody loved the X-Men. I was not a huge fan of the X-Men. I do appreciate the comic. I did like the films, but the Avengers was my favorite team. And I never thought an Avengers movie was possible, because once you establish characters, and Marvel had licensed characters to other studios, they couldn't, so I just thought it was never going to happen. So when it was first brought up, I was like, oh, that would be great, but it's not going to happen. Then they do the line in Iron Man, and I'm like, well, maybe it's going to happen. And then they really started moving towards it and building up to it. And my anticipation level, as much as I loved, Cap and Thor last year, I was like, let's just skip this and get to Avengers. I wanted to, and also too, I wanted to see the Hulk again. I love the Hulk. And I was, kind of sad and disappointed that there wasn't going to be a sequel to the Norton film. So I wanted to see him again, and just to see these characters interact when I've been reading the Avengers comic for 35 years. So and to see it brought to the screen and done so perfectly, pitch perfect, it really, I guess it sounds a little sad for, to say it was like a dream come true, but it really was a dream come true.
Well, one last thing I want to mention is, now we already talked about the extra scene at the beginning of the credit rolls with what could be the next step in this franchise with, the new big bad guy that they're going to introduce. Right. The final scene after the credit rolls, where they, at some point, they mention some restaurant or something, and then they are all sitting at this little cheesy deli type of restaurant, and they all look exhausted, and they seem to have barely enough strength to chew their food, and they're all just sitting there like in a half coma. And I
Yes.
could have swore, I'm not entirely sure, but I could have swore that Ruffalo's character, who I think was all the way on the right, he's laughing while they're doing that. I think he was covering himself because he was laughing through it.
They shot that scene the night of the premiere in L.A.
Is that the thing that they said that at the last minute they had to run and shoot something?
Yes, that's the scene.
Oh.
That's the scene. And it was great because I knew that it was coming. And, you know, everybody, when they did the scene after the main credits and they had the scene with Thanos, everybody left because they were like, okay, that's the scene. Time to go. I was the only person in the theater. Now, granted, I saw it at 10 o'clock in the morning, but I was the only person in the theater who stayed for that scene. Even though it was nothing, it was just great to see.
We had a similar experience. You know, we had a pretty full theater, and then as soon as the first credits go up, people start filing out, and there were about, let's say, 10, 15 people that were there enough to see the Thanos scene. And then the next wave of people start filing out, and I'm like, guy, you know, Kyle's.
I wasn't going to get up and tell people not to leave.
Yeah, that's exactly it. My son was like, should we tell? I'm like, no. If they don't want to sit here, they can all go
screw
home.
'em.
And by the time we got that last scene, it was 3 people left. It was us and 2 other sets of people. And it's like, good,
Right.
that's for us. That's not for the rest of them.
Exactly. They don't deserve it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a very good conversation, and something tells me we're going to be talking about this a little more because there's so many other things, and at this rate, we'll get this movie on DVD like in 3 or 4 months at the rate those things go. But thank you for joining me, and obviously, what do we go from here? You're going to have to let me know because this summer is jam-packed with potential blockbusters, but this is definitely the first big hurdle that everybody has to get over this summer because it's huge. And it's a very smart thing they released it before the summer officially starts because usually, I mean, it used to be the end of May when they would start releasing these things when kids were almost out of school. But now, forget it. At this rate, I mean, pretty soon they're going to be premiering these type of films in April.
I think so, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. On behalf of Steve Ivona and myself, we will see you here next time on Geek Fest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Yes, I've met them.
Yeah. Takes us a while to get any traction, I'll give you that one. But let's do a head count here. Your brother, the demigod. A super soldier, living legend who kind of lives up to the legend. A man with breathtaking anger management issues. A couple of master assassins, and you, big fella. You've managed to piss off every single one of them.
That was the plan.
Not a great plan. When they come, and they will, they'll come for you.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
Oh, I thought the beast had wandered off.
You're missing the point. There's no throne. There is no version of this where you come out on top. Maybe your army comes, and maybe it's too much for us, but it's all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
Stop.